power to the cloud. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. This is a broadcast of the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Education Department and part of the public teachings in English. My name is Rick Crammond. I'll be your host today, as in every day with the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for the last few years, and we'll carry on here with hearing people's concepts for new devices and answering questions on plasma technology and all kinds of topics here. We never really know what's going to happen until it happens, as this is not pre-planned and I kind of wing it as I go. That's my style. Similar to Mr. Keshe in a way, who doesn't use transcripts. He never has written things to read, generally speaking, and he basically wings it for many hours at a time with his knowledge, which is quite amazing when you think about it. Okay, well, I usually ask if anyone has anything they would like to bring up or present at this time and place and space. Any takers yet? We have a small group here in their Zoom group. There's a few in live stream and YouTube as well. So we're open to questions or comments, news, weather. Okay, I see we're going to have to warm things up a little bit here. Does anybody have any hot topics we could start with to discuss to get things warmed up? What's Mr. Keshe been talking about? He just had a couple, 3 hours of discussion in the One Nation, One Planet, One Race for World Peace yesterday. And seems like there's some movement or waiting for movement on that scientific paper, especially it's been presented to a number of governments around the world. And Mr. Keshe is waiting for the response from those governments, especially the American government, because now they're in possession of a document that says this Iranian technology has been proven to be a treatment for the coronavirus, and an inexpensive one at that. So will it get adopted and tried out at least by the American government, or will they not want to engage with someone they consider, some country they consider, or at least the government they consider to be their enemy? So it does put the American government in a strange position of either accepting their enemy's offer and possibly saving hundreds to millions of lives, depending, or refuse the offer, go with the plan that the semi-plan that they have now, and go with vaccine treatment and various other ways that they treat the symptoms of the coronavirus without having a lot of success in the way that the death rate is so high. So we'll see if that gets accepted or not. And if not, it'll still get spread around the world anyways, and people will know about the scientific basis for the plasma technology, which will make it spread even faster than the virus can spread.
It was interesting to note that Mr. Keshe predicted a spike in Europe, a very large spike in Europe, because the doctors are going to be pushing some of the cases into the corona category, even though they should be in the corona category. I guess they aren't right now, but by switching everybody over to corona, I guess they're going to receive a little reward in their accounts for Mr.
Well,
Gates.
Already been happening in the US and many countries. That's the way the medical system has been set up, that if you're a doctor and you what do you call it, diagnose a coronavirus case, you get an additional bonus. And then if they go on to be on the ventilator, you get an additional $30,000 bonus. I think the first bonus is $20,000 or $12,000 or something like that for diagnosing a coronavirus from any, just with the symptoms. You don't even have to have it certified as a test and everything else. And then they get paid. The hospitals get paid. They make really big bucks. That's why they order in all the ventilators, even though they have a 90% failure rate in terms of only 10% of the that get on ventilators live. 9 out of 10 die.
But I thought the numbers were supposed to be higher because they were mostly just reporting the corona lung, but not the corona stroke victims and the corona heart attack victims or some of the other victims. So Mr. Keshe told us recently that the numbers were much higher than officially being reported.
Yeah, but the thing is, the WHO and the vaccine people want to see the numbers as high as possible in order to bring about the vaccine
Right.
cure, supposed cure,
The
and
mandate.
they will do anything to get the numbers high. So, including who knows what in terms of actually changing laws and making decrees that we don't know enough about the virus, therefore we don't know if it's airborne or if it's from surfaces or anything. Really, we don't know anything. Just wash your hands. And so it's to the benefit of the WHO and to Bill Gates to have the virus spread as far and wide as possible so that they can make sure that they try to engage everyone into this vaccine supposed treatment, which will be a real mess for everyone.
I
Total
happened
mess.
to see a New England Journal of Medicine article last night, and they fully endorsed the suspension of employment and the requirement to stay at home if you're not going to be vaccinated, and
Mhm.
possibly other penalties.
Yeah, so it starts to get a little strange that way. So even though
Very.
you're vaccinated, it doesn't mean you're going to be. I mean, they're having trouble with this, with the people gaining immunity from the virus. They don't have permanent immunity. It's only good for a few weeks at the most. And so, what's going to happen when they get a vaccine? They'll get immunity, but it'll only be for a few weeks. And then they'll have to have a new vaccine and another vaccine and another. Have to have booster shots every few months and so on and so on. And that's not going to happen.
Right. And since we've been tasked with unifying the Unicos, Mr. Cash indicated that what, every time we come back from space, somebody's going to decide whether you get a vaccine or not because of the viruses you could be bringing back.
Well, this is the thing, yes. And it's the same as what if tomorrow we found out there's a meeting with the universal community and we're all invited? Okay, well, what's the protocol? Do you shake hands with them? Not likely. Do you, go up and hug and kiss? Not likely. Would you maintain a, 3 or 4 meter distance? Probably, and so on and so forth, because maybe the universal community would not want to communicate with our level of virus that we all have viruses and bacteria inside us all the time. We're always fighting off something or another on some level, and we coexist with many parasites and many bacterias, and some of them are actually quite beneficial. So, but beneficial to us, maybe not to a life form that comes from planet Zeus that has a different atmosphere and a different way of being and so on. It may be that their natural viruses that they enjoy and are good for them would totally destroy us and vice versa. So we'll have to have some sort of separation, and at least until we know what the basic rules of engagement are, you could say. Mr. Keshe has mentioned in the past spaceships that have a decontamination chamber that you pass through before you're allowed to get on the ship. Get on the ship. Now, getting off the ship, probably the same procedure, I would assume. And even NASA and other space agencies, they all have procedures for virus control. When the astronauts come back, they're isolated for a couple of weeks and so on and so forth. There's a whole program to the idea is that you don't want to bring viruses from space to planet Earth, and you don't want to take the viruses from Earth to space, say to Mars or whatever. So they're quite thorough in their decontamination of spacecraft that end up traveling to the moon or Mars, whatnot. at least in theory.
Well, NASA has asked people to come up with a new idea for a toilet in space.
Yes.
I think I saw a headline. Did you see the same headline?
Yeah. They're looking for ideas.
And as you know, some of the earlier flights, the capsule came back with a lot of you know what, spread around
is
the
that right?
inside of the capsule.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, it was quite a decontamination thing at first. I guess something happens to the astronauts, or it did, where they have. I'm not exactly sure, but Mr. Keshe had said they had to clean it up a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, lack of gravity does some strange things to people and to systems, so it's hard to keep that kind of thing under control.
Yeah, and on the QT as well, I hadn't heard that before, even though it's probably in the public domain.
It's always been in the questions around all the debris floating around.
I think an astronaut once said the two most deadly things you carry to space are your brain and your internal flora of your intestines. Those are the two things that can get you in space, because you can go crazy from your thoughts of, isolation, or from stress, or from whatever various circumstances, environment, and so on. And your intestinal flora, because that's the bad guys, good guys and bad guys you bring with you, your friends and your foes.
Right, and I think that's a two-way street you were talking about, Rick. When you leave, you don't want to bring any viruses from here out into space, but at the same time, you don't want to bring the viruses from space back to here. So there has to be some sort of maybe like scuba diving, a bell or something. If you're deep, you have to go into the oxygen chamber or the decompression chamber, but more related to a virus situation.
Yeah, like the med bed examples you start to see on the internet now, and of course with the plasma body enhancement chamber and so on. That would be the use for something like that, I would think, if you can create the atmosphere for decontamination. And I just noticed something yesterday. It was quite interesting. They've developed a robot for warehouses, and it's got these UV lights attached to it, and it drives around by itself through the warehouse, and it cleans the warehouse of the covirus by exposing the virus to UVC rays, which are hazardous to humans. So you'd have to use a robot to do it, and it has to be done away from humans. So it has to know where all the humans are, and it goes about its business radiating the warehouse and all the goods in it with UVC radiation, which will kill viruses. And it also helps clean the air at the same time. So it surfaces plus air.
Yeah,
Pardon me?
It affects the eyesight a lot.
That's right.
In the ambulances, but that's a big problem about the eyesight.
Yeah, that's right. So it can also give you cancer and so on. So UVC is not good for humans. That's why the robot runs around and does its thing away from the humans. Whenever a human is around, it stops its operation, basically. And it recharges itself, and just, it can do like a 3,000 square meter warehouse in a couple hours or whatever. It's just quite amazing tool. So you can imagine a chamber with, you know, just basic, some kind of UV radiation or some sort of radiation, some sort of field effect that can totally annihilate the virus condition and, you know, rejuvenate the body, make sure it's in tip-top shape as far as not, you know, giving off, not shedding virus and so on. So it seems like it would be doable, and we're partway there already with the plasma technology. Or maybe a chamber that you walk through and it sprays a mist of you know, certain kinds of GANS water, and that would be enough to neutralize the virus.
In those films like Star Trek, you had to go through a chamber and that would decontaminate you, remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
never was aware until recently of the amount of these energy packs, or what Mr. Keshe refers to as energy packages, as viruses, was so prevalent in space. I just thought it was microbes or other things they were worried about coming back on the capsules and things. But apparently collecting moon dust is not all that healthy for this planet either.
yeah, like in most parts of space, the rays would tend to annihilate the virus, I believe, but they can hide in inside of dust particles and other places that can move through space, such as
Well,
asteroids or comets.
the thing is, viruses are rays and are not particles.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Yes, it's a field effect, not a
Yeah.
actual particle as such.
That's why they're so dangerous in space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Imagine space full of dust particles who would be in a dark cloud.
Well, there certainly is a lot of dust in space, and you know, that's part of what is where the creation part comes from, and the old saying, from ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Essentially, we come from that dust, stardust. In fact, there's a new article came out yesterday in the physics realm about white dwarf stars. Like our star, the sun, is a yellow star right now, but eventually it will die and become a white dwarf. And they're finding out that these white dwarfs, when they die, they basically blow up and all their outer layers go sloughing off into space. And what they've discovered is creating carbon. And that's where the carbon in all of our carbon in our body, which is a significant amount, and carbon is the fourth most common element in the universe. But all the carbon comes from stars, and it's formed in these white dwarf stars when they end their lives and everything. So basically, they're talking about the life of a star, and that at its end of its life, before it either goes into a black hole or a supernova, it actually dies, and all of its body parts go spewing off into space as carbon and becomes you and me. So yes, we are formed directly from stardust, as well as the hydrogens are formed in stars as well.
So our work here with the energy package is basically a prerequisite to going out into space.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why Mr. Keshe is saying that the space technology will include the virus, virus technology. It will be just basically a small part of the space technology, but he's using it as a way to advance, as a foot in the door to bring about the space technology. But it's definitely one of the building blocks. We have to be able to address the virus condition to go to space. Not to mention exist on some other planet, which could be a whole other ballgame. But just to exist in space, we have to deal with virus condition in some way.
In fact, carbon is the third most numerous element in our bodies, and I imagine as our body is configured by what's in space, carbon is the 12% of our carbon bodies in quantity of atoms is carbon. 62% is hydrogen and 24% oxygen. And nitrogen, which we sort of think is the element that exists between carbon and oxygen, is only 1.1% of our body.
It's interesting. You think amino acids with the nitrogen, there'd be more percent.
Yeah, but apparently it must go down to carbon or go up to oxygen.
He also, Mr. Keshe, brought up an interesting point today about again, stressing that the corona is not all bad. And that the other idea that with people staying home, I know we lose 20 or 30,000 people in the United States to car accidents, not counting the millions injured. And because people are home, those death tolls and other work-related accidents are not happening. And so in the final analysis, the population has actually grown.
Yes, and here in Argentina, it's the same. Our normal figure is 20 accident deaths a day, and we're only having about half as many in the corona deaths. And in fact, you don't have all the injured people either.
Yeah, I figured out just in the additional lives saved from the lack of air pollution alone is over double the lives saved and the number of people killed from the coronavirus.
You shared that weeks ago.
Yeah, I sure did. I saw that coming right away because I could tell the difference in myself right away because there's way less traffic. I feel a lot better. I'm not getting wiped out all the time from the exhaust fumes. It was a delight to live under lockdown conditions for me. I wish we'd go back there so I can get around town without having to wear a mask to keep myself from dying from the exhaust fumes, which I've been doing for 20 years.
I thought you lived in a more open space place.
Well, unfortunately, there's still diesel trucks and gasoline cars and traffic and pockets where it hangs out and everything. And once you're multiple chemical sensitive, then even things like cigarette smoke or perfumes can set me off and so on. So I have to, especially gasoline fumes, which I work with sometimes. Today, for example. Last week,
when you get when you get stuck behind one of these big trucks, the diesels, it won't kill you, but it'll just make you wish you were dead, right?
Oh, last weekend, I was really sick from the fumes and the gasoline and some diesel, mostly gasoline fumes. And I was wiped out for 2 days. I was in bed solid and a severe headache and nausea, couldn't move and no energy. I felt like I had corona. But then that's what I get every time when I work with fumes. So no big
And how
change.
the smells have changed.
How the
Different
smells
gasoline-
have changed.
Yeah, the different gasolines have changed all their odors and
Yeah.
the, mm, the
Solvents and
trucks
various.
also. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember smelling. There was a very peculiar smell I liked very much from the Lister engines, very
Yeah.
slow burning engines. They had a very peculiar smell, which was very attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to actually not react and actually I kind of enjoyed the exhaust smells at one point in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm able, because I'm a mechanic, I can actually tell the condition of the engine of a vehicle by the exhaust smell. And I can
Yeah.
tell the state of the tune-up and whether it's burning oil or whether it's has other issues happening and so on and so forth, all from smells. I can smell, sometimes I can smell different engines. I can tell you what kind of engine it is from its smell.
Yeah,
That's
the
pretty
low octane petrols, they were pretty pleasant, although they had quite a bit of plumbum. What is it?
lead.
Lead. Yeah.
Yeah, the early lead days were not good days, and that's a good thing we got rid of the lead and the gas. Otherwise, we'd be even more stupid as humans than we are now. I'm hoping we get away totally from, I know that we're getting away totally from gasoline and diesel exhaust and all of the evaporating fluids like that. So it's good days coming very shortly for all of that, and we won't have to be suffering as a culture in that. It's sort of a silent suffering, but there's actually many people that suffer greatly from the exposure to fuels and solvents and fumes and so on and so forth. If you look at the most common ailment that keeps people away from work is skin ailments. And skin ailments are mostly due to various solvents and workplace irritations that occur. So, that alone is the billions of dollars in downtime from work, just from exposure to various workplace solvents and sprays and odors and whatnot.
Have you read Neil's comment on the chat? He says he's got a super zinc cup of brain.
Cup of brain. I like the name. Okay, let's. Can you show us? You haven't posted it yet, have you? Or can you show it in the? Can you share?
Posted in the Golden Age of GANs about a week ago or so with a bit of a comment. I'm not sure how to share pictures and that. I haven't done this as yet. If you can find it, it'd be handy. But essentially,
Do you want to try sharing as an experiment?
I'd have to go and find it.
Well, if you can't, then I could try to find it in Golden Age of GANs if you have a date or time.
It's about a week or so ago. It's not very far. We just searched for Neil. Essentially, this goes back to, where am I? It's my little booklet. It's related to the research groups finding an emotional balancing system. And in the KSW 315, which I've mentioned this before, at the 2-hour 56 mark, I think we discussed this several months ago, and Jalal sort of went off and played around with this, because at that point in the discussion, Mr. Keshe mentions that if you take a copper life 1 and instead of the nanocoated copper, replace that with nanocoated zinc, but essentially it's all the rest of it is the same as the copper life 1. Then he mentioned that the GANs, when you get the multi-layers of GANSs, at the very top you get a very good zinc, which he described with the aminos is the best GANs for any problems with the brain. And it's a very creamy, fluffy white GANs that I got, which floats on the top. Then you've got a clear layer in the middle. And then the bottom GANs is more of that beige color of CO2, which Mr. Keshe described also as a CO2. Maybe other things in amongst that. So I recently, there you go, you found it. So on the left, you can see it's an ordinary copper coil, and there's a lot of GANs deposits around that. I've already harvested the layer off the top, and that's in the left-hand jar. On the right-hand jar is the bottom layers. So it's a nanocoated zinc plate in the middle. I didn't have wire at that time, but I'm about to do another version because I've since got zinc wire from Jimmy and Lisa. And on the far right in the cup is just plain zinc, a piece of zinc plate with a battery. So it's basically the same as Copper Life 1, except there's a nanocoated zinc in there. Well, it produced a massive amounts of GANs. You can see there's still a lot of stuff in the bottom that I haven't harvested. But the top layer is what Mr. Keshe describes as yeah, the best GANs you can make for working with conditions of any brain problems. So I'm about to sort of look around for depressed guinea pigs to start playing around with this and see what sort of results we get. It's quite a remarkable, beautiful GANs. It's very fluffy and white, and the fact that it floated on the top, it was a 2 centimetre thick layer. Some people have been getting that with the Copper Life 1, but there's, of course, that copper. Now, you were talking about before how carbon can be created in space and whatever. Well, what I noticed was a very strange effect, which is not shown in this picture, but underneath the copper coil, sort of down the bottom, which is the left-hand side, I noticed there were some bundles of a black tubules and in it like a little ball of black tubules that had all coiled up, and there was 2 of these, one a smaller one on the other side. These black materials was nowhere near the zinc, the nanocoated zinc, so it wasn't the nano layer coming off. It was like a sort of like a bit like a mini scrubber, except it was black. Now, initially, when I first saw that down the bottom, I thought that some black spider had fallen into my cup and was down the bottom. And so I tried to hook it out, but the black tubules then disintegrated. And I realized that something very strange is going on here, that something grew in the GANs that was like a carbon, I suppose, tubules forming and curling around as they were forming, which may have something to do with the copper coil and the way the coil was, and particularly the end of the coil pointing down into the bottom of the GANs. I was trying to work out where the carbon might have come from. From the air? Well, probably not. And why did it just appear at the bottom of that coil? It's a glass jar, so it's not coming out of the plastic. But then I realized on the top, I've used, just to grab something to support my middle electrode, I used a pencil. And the pencil, while it's the carbon part of it is not touching either electrodes. It's laying across. So I'm sort of wondering whether it might have pulled the carbon out of the pencil in that coil, and something to do with the vortexes coming from the coil formed this little bundle of black tubules down the bottom. Once, of course, I disturbed the GANs, then these disintegrated and my GANs then took on a slightly grey colour. So cup of brain is sort of like the white matter and the grey matter. But anyway, I just sort of thought I'd share the observations, and for those people that might be associated with the emotional balancing system, which I rarely get onto those groups because they start at midnight our time, and not often has there been a lot, Mark will know about this, not a lot of stuff has been presented in some of these groups at this point in time. We're still waffling around a bit. But anyway, any questions or comments about this?
Well, interesting. Usually black bits are coming from the zinc, like you mentioned. But,
Yeah, but it's nowhere in play.
Maybe the black bits are black copper, I wonder. How do you know they're carbon as such?
Just guessing, yes, you could be right there. But
I wonder how you could test. There's probably chemical ways to test whether it's, copper, carbon, or zinc, for example. There'd be some basic chemistry tests that could be done that way, I suppose. But yeah, that's unusual. One thing I noticed is your plates and coils seem to be touching the GANs, and they're not supposed to do that. So that can change things in terms of creating things that you didn't expect. I usually find the GANs will change color when the electrodes are touching it, that kind of thing. So
yeah, the
something to
left
think
and
about.
right electrodes actually are above. It's just the angle of the photography, but
Okay.
they're not touching it. But the center plate is, because it was fairly long, anicoted zinc.
And the GANs builds up so quickly that it's hard to pull it off in time to keep it off the plates. I find when I used to have plates that went close to the bottom, but you would have to pull off the GAN so often so that it didn't hit the GANs.
Well, the very interesting thing is that I produced the first version of the cup of brain, which was basically what you're seeing, and I used a semi-flat battery in that, and it produced a small amount of GANs at the bottom, but virtually nothing at the top. Just a few, bits of aminos floating around, but no thick, creamy, frothy layer as described by Mr. Keshe. And so I harvested what was at the bottom, and that's in the right-hand jar, and then topped it up with salt water, 15% salt. So I topped it back up as I sucked it off with a syringe, you can see just in the foreground there. And I put a fresh battery in there, which was around about 1.1 volt. It wasn't totally charged. I used recharge batteries. But there's just a really strange thing about it. It took a while in the first case with the semi-flat battery to produce a GANs. It was about 4 or 5 days. In between that, I was discussing making this particular GANs with another member of our group she started talking about anxiousness and anxiety being in this current situation that we have around the world. And so I said I was looking for guinea pigs. So she immediately went oink, oink, and said, I'll be a guinea pig. At that point was when I harvested what I'd made already, and I didn't have anything up the top. So I put a new battery in there, and my intention now had changed from just seeing what happens to making something that may be of service to some people. Overnight, I made 50 mils of that white GANs and probably another 50, 60 mils of the bottom layer GANs. It all happened overnight, so incredibly fast. And since then, the production rate hasn't been anywhere the same. But I think with all of these GANs kits, as many of us listening, playing with plasma have found out that intention does seem to have quite an impact on what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jalal ever report back what sort of experiment results he got from that experiment? This is a month ago or more now, I think, when it was first discussed.
I don't know. He's not here now, and I haven't heard any word about that.
Yeah. Somebody asked, these were caustic nanocoated, the zinc plate, and I don't use the heat treating one. I don't find I have very much success with the fire. Anyway, food for thought. Everybody,
Very nice.
right now.
I like the cup of brain idea. That's nice. Might be a little hard to serve to someone. Would you like a cup of brain? No, thank you.
Well, some of us might have had that experience as a child when you'll sort of eat whatever's put in front of you with threat of not getting dessert. And we used to get a lot of offal in the early days.
Awful with the O, not with an A. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, what else we got here? Any questions for Neil, first of all? No questions, no comments. Okay, well, thank you, Neil, for bringing that up. I also keep aside my lighter, fluffier GANs that seems to form sometimes. Keep that in a special jar for special times because I consider that the best GANs, the lighter, whiter kind of stuff.
In the past, I did a lot of experiments with the different GANs, the basic ones, and I think I've been playing with plasma 4 or 5 years now. And so I made hundreds and hundreds of patches shared out to friends and family and whoever mentions, oh, I've got an acre of pain or whatever. Here, have a patch. Tell me. Now, a few have come back and said, oh, nothing, didn't do anything for me, sort of thing. And I've often found them to be quite negative people, not tuned into themselves very much. But I've had some amazing testimonials. Mm-hmm. And some of them, the zinc patches I found were very, very interesting. How fantastic they were for people suffering from anxiety and depression and insomnia. Putting either the patches under the pillow or in a hat or on the chest for anxiety and stress. And so I'm looking forward to see what this super zinc with the aminos will do to people. So I'm about to trial this over the next weeks. And I'll make a second cup as well, which will use equal length zinc coil, copper coil, and a piece of zinc plate, and have it a little bit higher up in the kit. But I found there is quite a difference you get in results on how much voltage there is in that battery for these triple electrode cups. But I put everyone's brains asleep with this.
It's a tough crowd tonight. So Zoltan has a question in the live stream chat. He says, according to your experiences, what will be produced from a copper nanocoil coated with soda and a magnesium bar with the salinity of 10% sodium chloride, and the voltage between the magnesium bar and the copper nano is 1.4 volts.
I tried to make a magnesium GANs just in my early ignorance, thinking a nanocoat, like, you know, doing a version of the normal CO2, but replacing the zinc with magnesium ribbon. And magnesium, of course, is very flammable. You put heat to it and it'll combust. So you definitely can't fire nanocoat it. Caustic nanocoated, I wasn't going to try it. It corrodes very, very quickly in the water. I did get a sort of a bit of a GANS, but mainly my magnesium electrode disintegrated. So putting a battery on that would accelerate the disintegration. And it doesn't make a magnesium GANS, because when you look at the atomic weights of each of them, it makes something else. So I found magnesium a tricky one to try and make that GANS using the metals. You have to find some other way, and people talk about using, you know, different types of organic materials and things like that that are very high in magnesium. But of course, the Couple Life one apparently does make some sort of magnesium in amongst the other GANSs down the bottom, according to what Mr. Keshe was saying. So it's the field strengths that you end up with. So I think using a magnesium bar and a nanocoated copper and a battery on it would disintegrate your magnesium very quickly. And I'm not sure what sort of GANs you would get, because work out from the atomic weights of the two, you'll get something different. I did look up on my atomic things, and I wasn't sure whether it was selenium or something like that, but it's certainly different to what we would anticipate trying to get.
And did you hear Mr. Keshe say, Neil, that the COVID is trying to convert magnesium now? He was talking about metals.
Into calcium?
No, magnesium. It's going past the calcium.
No, I didn't hear that.
Making magnesium in the cells, you mean, Mark?
I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that, but I thought I heard him say it wants to convert magnesium now.
Maybe working on plants.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was working on meat and what have you, animals and all this. So stuff that would be a lot of carbon.
Magnesium is also associated with the muscle systems.
Yeah. That's
One
why
way
it
we
may affect the muscles also.
Mm-hmm.
Affect the calcium and the magnesium in the muscles.
So on the good side, Mr. Keshe said that this COVID can teach mankind a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm very impressed with the idea of understanding the calcification and the rapidity, the rapidness of its ability to calcify. And Mr. Keshe said we're going to learn how to redeposit calcium in a controlled manner in certain areas, even growing bones or recalcifying hips.
Yep, fix a broken bone in a few minutes or maybe an hour or two compared to weeks.
And then, of course, if we understand the calcification, we can start to work with decalcification,
Mhm.
which would be your blood and maybe certain other kidney stones, and a lot of knowledge will be taught mankind from the corona.
Like I would like to pull the calcium out of my, say out of my arteries or other parts of the body where it's not needed and put it into my tooth to repair a broken tooth. Wouldn't that be cool? You know, what if we could what if we could learn how to do that from the interactions with the coronavirus? That would be one.
And how many people go through cataract operations? Are cataracts to do anything with calcium?
I think so.
It's mainly protein and the lens degrading and changing. The ultraviolet has a problem with mutating proteins and stuff. I can add a little bit to this discussion, but sometimes I get challenged because I've got a degree in biology, which includes biochemistry was my majors. And then I ended up working for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization on influenza research when I was not long out of university and when I had a lot of hair as well. And so my understanding of how a virus in the 3D state works is you know, it's either RNA or DNA hijacking a host cell's protein encoding mechanisms and making that little host factory reproduce many more viruses. And they have a protein coat and they have attachments, lock key attachments that will be tailored to whatever host they normally infect. So they don't normally go and attach to any old cell. They have to be engineered or self-designed to infect certain types of cells, attach it and then inject the nucleotides inside, so they're RNA. But the calcification, I've seen scientific papers getting around. Dr. Rashid Battar is one of the interesting people out there talking about the science of all of this virology. And there's a couple of other research PhDs and doctors. And what's come to light is that in a cell membrane, you have these various types of what we call gates. They are portals, they are molecular tunnels that open and close depending on voltages or hormonal signals or ionization, different things. Different ones do different things. And they let matter state go in and out of the cells depending on what's needed. And because normally it's the membrane's there to protect the cell and keep it sort of intact. Well, one of the articles that's getting out there in recent science papers, and Rick, we talked about this earlier, was the voltage-gated calcium channels. And that microwave radiation changes that, opens the gate, and the cells get flooded with normal ionic calcium, which is in the blood serum and in the normal liquid that's floating around. So it keeps the cell, once it's under the microwave radiations, is opened up and it just floods the cell with calcium, and then that causes havoc within the cell. And it usually kills the cell, but it's calcifying, and then it becomes a matter state deposit. And so I'm very suspicious that the virus and the 5G that was all happening at the same time, where all the main virus epicenters were, was also a place where a lot of 5G radiation was being pumped out everywhere. And Rick sent me that paper which talked about how the virus can be deactivated with 8.4 gigahertz, or it can inversely, in another frequency, probably be activated and made more virulent. All it has to do is rotate a protein to another position on the attachment lock key situation, then it could be even more virile. So there's all sorts of things being played around with, and of course things get mixed up. So of course, when a virus infects a cell, it makes zillions more cells within it, more virus particles within it. And just by the physical overcrowding, it explodes that host cell. It just ruptures the membranes, and everything that's in the host cell spews out into the environment. And basically, it liquefies the tissues. And that's what we see in the lungs, that they just start liquefying. And then there's all this matter, which becomes very attractive to bacterial infection. So then we get pneumonia and all sorts of other things starting to happen with the bacterial feeding on all this protoplasm and all these mitochondria and nuclei and everything that's now floating around in the soup of liquefied tissue. Ebola, of course, we know attacks muscles and things like that, and that does the same thing. It liquefies the body. These viruses, they're just invading a cell, replicating like mad, and then rupturing, exploding that cell. And what it releases immediately infects all the other ones nearby. So very, very quickly, a whole area of tissue can be liquefied. And amongst all that ingredients in the protoplasms will be calcium and sodium and potassium and all the different materials that's in the cytoplasm normally in a cell. And different cells will have different materials. So if it's muscle, then there'll be more magnesium. If it's near the bones or anything like that, then of course there's a lot more calcium being released. And so I think there's multiple things playing around and happening with the corona. And I seriously think there's an implication that these high frequency microwave radiations have got a big part to play in all of this. And I think if people look very carefully following the white rabbit, this was part of the design in the labs where these bioweapons were manufactured. How do you turn a bioweapon on? How do you turn it off? How do you protect your own civilization? Well, you make it genetically so it'll only infect, say, for example, Asians or Africans or whatever. But then, of course, viruses, nature mutates and they change and they can't be controlled. That's where the lunacy of all of this comes in, these idiots like Gates and others and Fauci and everybody who try to augment a natural virus that isn't any harm to us to make it more virulent. And then say, oh, we're just seeing how infections work. Well, we know how infections work. Tell us the truth. You're augmenting a virus to make it a bioweapon. And that's what's coming to light. The Wuhan laboratory has been found that the principal shareholder of the company that has that research lab is George Soros. And who's one of his best mates? Bill Gates. But I don't think this is the place for us to go into all that sort of conspiracy stuff. We're talking about plasma here. So I think the truth will come out as more research is done, but the calcification, I think, is linked up with microwave radiation. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
We like your 2 cents very much. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And was it you, Neil, who asked Mr. Keshe that direct question about the 5G? And he said, not really.
Look, I think there's certain things that Mr. Keshe has to be very politically correct and not talk about at this stage. And so there are certain subjects that have to be avoided in this short period of time that's about to come out with all these future products that are being developed and timing is everything. So,
And he
Yeah.
might not be aware of certain information as well about the technical details of high high frequency 5G, fields and how they affect. He may not have read the scientific papers on it or any of the conspiracy theory stuff on it as well. So
yeah, well, a lot of the research has been heavily suppressed in the past, but they've known since 1977. The Russians did a lot of research, and they found that microwaves, any of them, microwaves from 2.4 G upwards, is causing serious biological harm. And there are now new papers pointing a finger that autism and ADHD and all of that is not caused by so much by the adjuvants in a vaccine, but more so caused by Wi-Fi and the old 3G phones and everything. That since the 90s, when all of that started to be developed, mobile phone technology came in, and I was working in IT in those days. I could feel that thing cooking my brain. That first versions of those phones were about the size of a house brick. So I wouldn't use them. My biological knowledge told me a microwave cooks proteins. It excites water molecules, which bond very carefully with proteins and also your membranes. And so a microwave oven cooks meat and boils water. Well, we're mainly water and meat. So it's just different levels of intensity. It's still going to do harm. So they've now seen that the microwaves have caused brain damage with all this Wi-Fi and everything for the last 3 decades. And particularly, the proximity to these things, people are sitting more and more closer to their computers with microwave transmitters, Wi-Fi and all this sort of stuff, Bluetooth. Why'd they name it that? Your teeth all turn blue once you're exposed to it. So there's going to be a lot to be answered when the suppression of the research knowledge, which has been known since 1970s, the Russians did all those tests. I don't think the Russians are rolling out 5G commercially for the public or any of that sort of stuff. They're probably even wary of 4G, pulse microwave, because they're pretty clued up on that, and they haven't got the huge corporations pushing it like they are in the West without even being tested. So that's highly criminal activity. But they've known about this for a long time, and I dare say Mr. Keshe, studying nuclear radiation, they would have known about the problems with microwave. But it's like trying to tell people 30 years ago that tobacco smoking was give you cancer. You'd end up being sued for defamation by Rothmans or the big tobacco people. Now we've got big pharmaceuticals attacking you if you say X, Y, or Z, and there's the telecommunication industry is massive. Trillions and trillions of dollars involved in this. They've seen it money for jam. And of course, we know that politicians are owned by corporations. So we're going to have a hard time to change this. And plasma and moving into a different technology is the only way we can sidestep some of these problematics that the eugenicists are trying to force upon us at the moment. Whether Trump's going to drain the swamp or not, it's yet to be found out. But I think we all have to become educated and educate other people. And it's the only way that, the mass humanity waking up is going to save our ass, basically. The corporations are out of control. They're just running for the money. And they're not caring that, 5G is so close in frequency to the microwave radiation weapons that have been developed by the likes of Halliburton and many other companies. And they know that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I had always heard, and I could be way off here, that the astronauts took microwave. I don't know if they have a microwave on the space station, but they had always consumed microwaved food because of the fact that it killed some of the microbes and the other problems or contamination in the food, not to bring it out into space or into the capsule. Has anyone heard that?
Yeah, microwave kills everything in depending on its intensity. It doesn't matter so much what frequency it is, it's to do with the intensity. But now that they're getting up into very high frequency areas and they're pulsing it even worse, they're getting all sorts of resonance things happening, the proteins being completely denatured, the lipid layers, which is a sandwich of, your membranes are a sandwich of protein and fats, and they're being all ruptured and destroyed. All sorts of nasty things are happening. And it's not being discussed because of varying reasons, you know. Just like smoking didn't do you any harm up until 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And people still smoke.
Does that mean G9 and G10 are worse than G5? Because Mr. Keshe referred to having 2 cell phones when we get up into this G9 and G10 area of being able to produce things with them.
Well, I don't like the whole idea of microwave, and that's why we've got to get back into a plasma communicating system that's using 0 point. And that's what's,
That's,
you know.
that's the thing, exactly. I think Mr. Keshe talked about that in terms of his relationship with Huawei and Huawei, the telecommunications, Chinese telecommunications giant. He mentioned that, you know, when he's talking about 9G and so on, they're moving way beyond the kinds of, you know, kinds of waves that they use now into plasmatic type systems, which will be totally different. They will probably have their, you know, downside or possible, you know, ill effects if they're not properly used as well. But like all higher energy systems, can be used against one if so chosen, or because of ignorance usually. So same with microwaves. When the microwave technicians were first working on microwave towers, they sometimes didn't turn off the microwave in order to work on them. But then some of the workers were getting strange symptoms, and it turned out they were actually cooking internal organs by working in front of the, you know, the microwave tower transmitter, where it's really high energy coming out, and yeah, can definitely affect your organs in that case. You know, it's, yeah, so it's something to think about, but it's also a dicey topic, because anyone that brings up the topic of the co-virus and 5G in basically in the same sentence, or if we were to put the title instead of Keshe Plasma Reactor Group on this video, put the title COVID and 5G, well, it would be instantly banned by YouTube. They would just simply take it down, no questions asked, and that would be it, because they do not support the so-called theory and conspiracy, so-called conspiracy of the co-virus plus 5G. But if you look into it, there's some pretty solid evidence for that sort of thing. So in a way, if the facts are there and it's true, then they can't be disputing it in terms of fake news. They can't label it as fake news, because if their investigators actually look into it, they would find out the facts might be true. So it's, but right now it's just a bit of a dicey thing. There's a lot of control happening around the whole co-virus thing, and anyone who comes up with alternative remedies and so on for COVID, those videos are also taken off YouTube. They only allow the standard, the standard story from WHO and the CDC and other so-called accredited sources that are the authorities on the COVID, even though they're so wishy-washy that it's almost ridiculous to listen to. They can't decide whether a mask is good or a mask is bad, or whether you should keep 1 meter or 2 meters or 100 meters distance. They don't know whether the virus travels by air, by sea, by land, or by dirty hands, basically, really.
Public transport.
Yeah, that's the way, mainly how it travels.
Yeah, a virus particle, particularly the corona, which are little small round buggers, unlike influenza, which is, what's that look like? It looks like a soda bulb with legs. But the corona is a very small round one, and a mask is like layers of chicken wire put together. And it's like trying to stop blowflies getting into your house with fly screens made of chicken wire. The holes, right. Mask, it's ridiculous. So the whole concept of a mask is basically comes down to what everybody says, a symbol of compliance.
Well, it's actually even worse than that, because I mean, I've talked to people, local kids working in the stores here. For example, the one kid was talking about, I asked him, it must be uncomfortable to wear that mask all day. He says, yeah, I've got zits all over my face that I never had since I was a kid, but it's not as bad as my friend. He got strep throat from his mask, from rebreathing his bacteria all day. And I went, Jesus Christ, this is just one person that I happen to ask. Multiply that out by the millions and billions of masks around the world. And people, and you know, you see that in the healthcare workers, their face is all irritated around where the mask was, and they have this mask face now that when you take the mask off, if you've been at it all day, it leaves a very definite irritation. And half of them are made out of synthetics and so on, and they're going to end up, people have face cancer and everything else from these masks, let alone strep throat. But it just made me realize, wow, what a mess to, in the area I'm in, we've had so few people affected by the coronavirus that nobody even knows anybody that's been affected by it. And yet people are wearing masks all over the place and maintaining their social distancing and so on and so forth. I'm sure that if you look at the infectious diseases have probably gone way, way down since everybody's been self-isolating, wearing masks, because it's preventing the spread of many other diseases, but perhaps not the coronavirus. I don't know. It's difficult to say.
There's been some very interesting reactions to developing the situation of masks. Very creative. One guy used a slice of white bread, and it was still over his face, so they couldn't prosecute or do anything about it. He was symbolically wearing some sort of mask. But I think a slice of white bread would be much better than some of those commercial ones. Another guy had a bucket over his head with 2 holes cut for his eyes and walked around like Ned Kelly. It was some sort of mask, but you know, he was still able to breathe much healthier. And there's various other ones. People have used tampons. Other people, well, there's a very funny one where somebody used a nappy.
One person created a whole ecosystem, like a sort of an umbrella around his head, with plants in there, and like a little terrarium basically to provide fresh oxygen to him, I suppose.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing, yeah.
I can vouch about those energies. I used to work up on the towers without putting the transmitters off, and I could feel the radiation of the FM radio frequency burning inside my body many a time.
Well, it's lucky
Yeah.
you're still
Yeah, and it's a
What?
strange. Go ahead. Sorry.
Neil
Lucky you're
was
still alive.
like,
Yeah.
what?
Lucky you're still alive, he said.
Yeah, I'm pretty much alive. I must have killed all the bugs. That's why I'm gone the other way around.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as they say. So in that case, you know, whether it's radiation or bacteria or viruses, sickness, losing limbs, whatever it happens to be, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger, and in many ways. Not a recommended technique to make yourself stronger, but it just in the course of life, it seems to happen. These stressful events seem to be plenty of them without having to seek them out.
I also know you're not very keen on my other recommendation, my own GANs.
Yes, right. Some people are. I recognize that. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I was going to mention just as a last note on 5G, because we don't want to pursue it that much perhaps, but there was an interesting coincidence that before the virus struck all the in Canada especially, and in many countries, the care homes, the old people's care homes, or what do they call it? Different names for these rest homes and places for the elderly, and so on and so forth. But you know, basically, it's the warehousing of the elderly in a hospital-like situation, but with their own privacy, more or less. Some of them don't have as much privacy as you think, and so on. But what they've done just before the virus hit, in about a couple of months before, there was a big push in these care homes for what they call the smart technology, which was to put in the 5G type or advanced 4G systems that could handle all the devices that needed to be part of this smart network. So you'd have things that would listen to voice, and things that would, you know, be able to order things and to turn the lights on and off, and all of these extra electronic device loads were to be put on this network. So the network had to be faster and have greater bandwidth. And so that's where 5G excels in its bandwidth and speed. But they have to focus the rays to a particular devices in order to get them, and they have to have more transmitters. So they set up around one care home in North Vancouver, the one that had all the outbreaks in British Columbia, where I live. There was about 40, I think I counted 44 towers in the immediate vicinity of the care home. And more than any other area of all of Vancouver or west coast of Canada, anywhere, this one care home was surrounded by, like I say, multiple transmitters. You can look at maps of the 5G rollout, and you can look at 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G all on the same map. It'll show you the location of the transmitters and the area that's covered, and each provider of the service and so on and so forth. It's easy to look up. I think they have to do it legally probably. There's international maps for each country and each city and so on. So I was shocked and surprised to see this care home surrounded by 5G, because when I first was hearing these rumors of 5G, I went, oh, I don't know, it's kind of sounds pretty out there and kind of just too outrageous to even think about or whatever. And when I looked into it, I just could not believe that there could be so many transmitters around a place like that. And it being the one that had the major breakout where like 22 or 23 people or more died in the facility. So coincidence, perhaps, don't know, but certainly somebody would have a field day writing their thesis or some sort of book on that sort of possibility.
Yeah, the same thing happened with the cruise ships. The two ships had the
They've just been all converted to smart technology as well. So maybe it's part of the dumbing down of humans is the smart technology is dumbing us down in more ways than we even imagined. However, things are becoming more transparent as we go along, and it's becoming more and more difficult to kind of get away with that sort of thing. So there are powers that be that like to exert their power and have dominion over ordinary folks and don't really care, let's say, if people get sick because, hey, they've got the solution to that too. You've got cancer, no problem. We've got a full chemo treatment program and yeah, we'll give you radiation too to treat your cancer. What? You mean you shoot me with radiation that causes cancer to treat my cancer? Well, thank you. That sounds logical. Anyway, don't get me going on that one. So suffice to say, like Neil said, there could be both pluses and minuses with the whole idea of interacting with radiation, in particular, the cell phone type radiation. But look at the UV radiation, like the UVC, which is known to kill coronavirus type viruses within 2 minutes, basically. And look at even ordinary sunshine will do that. Within 2 minutes, it kills the virus.
That's right.
And of course, what do they tell us to do? We want everyone to stay inside. We don't want anyone outside. And do not go to the beach, especially. We're closing down the beaches. Do not allow your kids to play in the playgrounds in the sunshine. That's not allowed. And so go hang out in a dark place for a while, for 2 or 3 months, and see what happens. And that's the advice from, the top. My God, how do we get to be so backwards, and how do we actually listen to these people? Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Talk about
and plenty of fluoride.
Plenty of what? Pardon me?
Plenty of fluoride to dumb down your brain. Yeah, drink plenty of that.
Yeah, so anyway. Well, let's maybe move along to some other rosier topics. We could probably go on for that and put other posts up, but I don't want to make it into a big deal here. We can discuss things, but we'll have to wait and see how things pan out on the world scene. There's kind of a battle royale with the pros and cons and people, authority figures on both sides airing it out, and we'll see. The truth will eventually come out.
Rick, I have heard from one of our group who went on and started making lots and lots of infinity loops. I have a few around my house, but I haven't had any way of testing their effectiveness. She uses a little USB dongle in her computer for her internet connection. So it's 3G, 4G transmitter transmitting off to the nearest tower. And she put infinity loops all over her windows. And she then found that her computer connectivity was dropping out. It was suppressing the signal coming backwards and forwards. So it's sort of one little testimonial that these infinity loops do seem to have an effect if you've got enough of them around.
Yeah, but then if the signal drops, then the 5G recognizes, oh, there's a signal drop, increase the power, whoop, whoop, ramp up power to that area, the signal has dropped. Oh, the signal keeps dropping, okay, ramp up more power, focus on that cell phone that's on the other side of the blockage. So if you try to use your cell phone, it's going to be increasing the power, trying to get through in order to increase the signal strength. So that's a bit of a dicey thing that way, in a way. It's the same as wearing a tinfoil hat, which can actually protect you against 5G. But then if the certain other rays may come in at a different angle and so on, you can actually cause a reflector inside the tinfoil hat for inside the brain area. So you got to kind of be careful what you're doing with tinfoil hats. But they can actually be like a Faraday cage protection against rays and so on.
There's
always a what? Pardon me?
There's always a catch-22.
Yeah, it's never quite straightforward, it seems.
So it's a better argument to go back to landline phones and use hard-wired internet connections, Ethernet to your computer and cable or optical into your house. Basically get away from transmission technology.
Well, I think we're moving into soul-to-soul technology, and we'll get away from all the wiring, because people won't go back to wires. We're into the wireless now, and people are starting to. I think we'll find a way to mate between the technology end of things and the soul end of things. So, I mean, if souls can communicate, then why can't we find a way to interact with technology that we have, but still using the what would you say, the powers or the techniques that from a soul level. I mean, it just makes sense that we're moving more and more toward that oneness. It seems like, why would you need to communicate with all the details of a phone conversation, or clumsily trying to use your voice to communicate each word individually and all the meanings of the words and the meanings that can be construed incorrectly, and then there's the language issue and all of that kind of gets dropped with the soul-to-soul communication. You just go and it's and you're done, and you don't have to explain all the details about your emotional state and all of the ins and outs of your life and how you're affected by your great grandmother's uncle who, did something at that time or whatever. And so it all becomes more of a flow of information rather than specific details that have to get played out on an interpersonal basis, perhaps. But on the other hand, maybe we're going to have to go to smoke signals or something and really revert to the past. Things are burning all around us. Why not use smoke signals?
Or 2 cans and a string.
Yep, if the string doesn't get burnt from all the stuff burning. two cans and a wire, that would work better. Yeah. Copper wire, and you can nanocoat it in the flames. No, I don't think we're going to go to the everything flaming point, at least in most parts of the world. I think we're moving toward the peace and prosperity in a very rapid manner. It's just some things just came out. There is a maybe I'll show that now that it's time for some gory details here. Let's see, where was it? Here we are. Okay, let me get this up on the screen. This is from Veterans Today. And today is Veterans Today, I believe. This might come out in the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, but it's coming out here first. Okay, this came up in the Veterans Today, which is our basically friends of Mr. Keshe and the Keshe Foundation and Veterans Today. And in one of their main articles here, it says, Dutch bust Mossad's floating torture prison in investigation begun by Keshe Group. And it goes on to say, years ago, a Dutch-Belgian criminal gang, police aided by corrupt government officials, tried to kidnap Mehran Tavakoli Keshe, whose open source research would have been worth hundreds of billions if withheld and patented. Keshe fled to Italy, where Veterans Today took over his security in concert with the Carabinieri. I think that's the local Italian security services. Could be wrong about that, but that's what I believe. And they show a picture of
Shandor.
Duff. Yeah, with Shandor, Keshe, and Duff on the side from Veterans Today. And it just goes on to say more details about the gangs and about this has been in the news. This is actually in the mainstream news today about these torture chambers, and they're container shipping containers that have been modified, soundproofed, put a well, here's the gory details. This is a dentist chair mounted in the middle of a shipping container with straps for feet and arms, and a little toolkit of special tools and pliers and stuff. And you can bet it's not for dental work, at least not the kind that you tend to get dental work for. And that was actually in the mainstream news today about this, and the police have busted this group, and they arrested 6 people, found 7 of these containers that were made out ready to incarcerate people, to tie them up inside. And one of them was made into this torture prison. And they had a bunch of other things that they found with them and so on. So this is part of discovery was made last month by officers investigating leads generated by data from encrypted phones used by criminals that were cracked recently by French police. Detectives in the UK and the Netherlands have arrested hundreds of suspects based on the encrypted messages. And it's basically the Dutch criminal underworld and large-scale production of trafficking of drugs is the main reason here. They seized, 8 tons of cocaine and over a ton of crystal meth, and dismantled 19 drug labs and so on and so forth. So this was a big movement, and it mentions here detectives also discovered the 7 converted C containers in a warehouse in Woos Plantage, a village in the southwest of the country, close to the border with Belgium. So again, Belgium comes up here as one of the bad guys that are top in the world of this kind of criminal activity. And it just mentions something here too about the police saying that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that there's many more will be rounded up from all this as well, apparently. So you can look at that in Veterans Today in the one of the headlines there if you want to look at it in more detail. But interesting, it mentions the Keshe, Mr. Keshe, and the investigation begun by the Keshe group. So you wanted to specifically bring the investigations of Mr. Keshe and the Keshe knowledge seekers into the Belgians and others that were trying to control the technology and trying to harass Mr. Keshe and others. So it's interesting, that's come up once again. This picture has also come in a previous article from the Veterans Today. The mainstream media did not bring Mr. Keshe or mention anything about Keshe Group or that picture or anything. That's just the Veterans Today has brought that aspect into this bust by the Dutch police, which has gone international now within the news. So I think it's interesting that this kind of thing is being revealed and dealt with. They're actually making arrests and have tracked the people that they're tracking are not people on the low end of the totem pole. They're saying too, these are the high end, medium and high end dealers that they've rounded up this time around. So it's going to have a major impact. All right, well, it's good news and bad news in a way. We don't like to see stuff about torture and all that, but on the other hand, it's good to see some of the swamp being drained, at least in this way. And it's nice to see the Keshe Foundation's name, or Mr. Keshe's name, being brought up as in terms of one of the do-gooders who have initiated some of the work to bring down these organizations.
did you notice there's a story on the sidebar on the right about face masks and a bus driver?
I did see that earlier somewhere. French bus driver left brain dead due to face mask dispute. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that was the one I saw, but he probably got brain dead because somebody whacked him over arguing about face masks.
Yes, I imagine so. Although the face masks do limit your oxygen below the recommended OSHA or whatever the recommendations for normal environment for workplace environment. A face mask will reduce your oxygen content way below the recommended amount of oxygen for a normal environment for work.
The bus driver was beaten up because he refused to let the people go on board without face masks.
I see. Okay.
Very charming.
And the face masks are mandatory in on public transport in France. So, yep, he was repeatedly punched and then got a serious head injury, brain dead. Yep, well, there you go. Another side effect of the co-virus situation. Okay, what else do we have to discuss here today? Anything cheery and nice? Any success stories? Fun testimonials? Miraculous recoveries? Flying saucers in a garage? I'll take any of them.
My local wildlife likes jumping in my swimming pool now that I've got plasma in it. I've had ducks, wood ducks, no wood duck jokes, please, and a water dragon swimming around in my swimming pool. I think they enjoy the plasma environment.
I would think so. Most animals seem to prefer the GANS water to their ordinary water supply. I know I do. I've got some right beside me. In fact, it's empty. I have to go get some more. Okay, what else do we have for fun and games here?
Well, originally, Mr. Keshe had talked about spraying yourself with the first cup and then the second cup and so on. And then Carolina suggested, was it today, yesterday? Not to spray it all when you go out, but to spray from head to toe when you return home, and to try that out and to see what sort of different results, because apparently if you're spraying the cup, you're actually attracting it a little bit. Did anyone hear that?
Yeah, we heard it. It's just hard to hear it in your head because it seems counterindicative sometimes. I mean, we've been told to spray, you know, for protection, but if it doesn't protect, then would you want to spray the inside of your car? Would you want to spray even yourself when you get home? Why would you want to do that if it doesn't protect? I'm not really clear on the logic there.
I agree with you. There's a lacking of logic there.
I was actually shocked and surprised. I didn't understand why that would be the case. I thought we were there to spray the plasma all over, not to attract the virus, but to deplete the virus.
Exactly, to deplete the virus. Yeah, that's what we've been taught.
So
It was only suggested as a test.
but when someone of that status suggests a test, it's very important. She had positive results from it. So that's the thing about it. That seems unusual, but perhaps that's just the way it is. Maybe it can be explained in a very rational way. I'm sure Mr. Keshe will, if that's the case. And it may even be part of the protocols, maybe that come out in the
Yeah.
scientific paper coming out. Maybe she has a hot line on that. Well, next week or two will be very interesting in terms of watching how the effect of this scientific paper that's coming out, having the weight of a university in Iran, and the potency of the whole was it 100+ page paper with all the protocols and different uses and aspects of the GANs technology. Quite a document. I expect it'll have about equal importance to the first patent application that came out with, it was over 100 pages of the longest patent I've ever seen by far. So,
And it looks like Mr. Keshe is leaving the COVID in the dust, because he said we're going to rapidly go into space, very rapidly.
yes, that's his intention. And in that case, the virus is just part of the way to protect yourself in space. All part of the space technology, no big deal.
He's calling it post-corona.
Sounds like a new breakfast cereal. Get your post-corona and eat your Wheaties.
Post-corona knowledge.
So we have BC, which would be before Corona, and PC, which would be post-Corona, or maybe AC. BC and AC. AC would be after Corona. Maybe they'll start a new numbering system for the years and for the centuries. Have that much of an impact on the human race? What if it wiped out 90% of the human race or something. We would have to kind of start over with a whole different system for after Corona.
And considering this is in everybody's face every day across the planet, who would be opposed to trying some water and some other simple protocol?
Well, they'd be opposed. People are be opposed because it's too simple. It sounds too simple and too easy. How could it be so simple and easy when we have all of the greatest and wonderfulest and highest scientists of the world working on this problem, and they haven't been able to solve it, and they just, tell us wash your hands.
And just like the mayor said in Iran, he's going to take it into the city, clean up the city, and then go and show the minister his gross incompetence.
Yes, well.
I don't mean the mayor.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. That leads to more complications in other ways, but that's part of what has to get cleaned up as well. There's a whole grafting system in that way. When you think about it worldwide with the medical system and the way the doctors are paid, the way the hospitals are paid, the medical system, the way that's set up, and so on. It's been tied up for centuries, basically, to make money off of people and make it look in a more or less professional manner with the latest technologies to a certain point, to make the doctors look like they're competent and not ignorant and so on and so forth. But it's just not cutting it. Well, they are cutting it too much. That's the problem. They're cutting instead of using other types of technology that don't require surgery and cutting.
And it's like the universal unit, Mr. Keshe said, when you're going to hear these stories, and if you've got a billionaire that's been seeking relief and he finds relief and he gives a testimony to it, and the federal agency said, no, that's a lot of poo-poo, who are you going to believe? When you got thousands of testimonies, and we have thousands of testimonies now with the COVID.
Yeah, but anecdotal, what they call anecdotal or testimonies, are not really that valid scientifically. They're sort of like background data or information, but you have to have like some kind of double-blind test or standardized, what do you call it, statistics and so on for a true peer review scientific kind of situation, and that'll satisfy the scientists. They have to have that kind of ironclad, make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and so on, sort of thing. But any ordinary person that can see and has eyes and ears and nose and a brain that functions can pretty much tell the difference between their dog that was sick and their dog that's feeling way better after drinking the cans water, or the fact they had a certain sickness. There's one person that was in the chat earlier. Was it a 7-year-old that she had a kidney illness and was ready for dialysis, and she'd been drinking the Gans water. 7-year-old person drinking the Gans water religiously, so to speak, and had recovery and has now 100% kidney function. Everything's good. So that's a major, major difference in medical outcomes in that case. You get onto dialysis, that's a bad trip. You end up being on the machine several days a week and for hours at a time. It's grueling, debilitating.
No question. A friend of mine's brother was on dialysis for a number of years until he's seen about 10 people die on the dialysis table right next to him.
Yeah, well, that's basically how my mother died. She was on dialysis at the time, got an infection from all the tubes they put in her and so on. So yeah.
Rick, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did Mr. Keshe said anything about WHO with the document? I mean, we're focusing on government, but what about WHO?
What about WHO? What do you mean?
Have they received it? What did they? Because I mentioned, yeah, I know he mentioned that they met all the criteria. Because if they have received it, maybe we could just go to the press and continue on that. Because I'm so pessimistic waiting for the government for this.
Well, we just have to wait until the actual document is released, because you can't go to the press with no document.
Yes.
And the document has to be certified in some manner, which it will be through the universities anyway, if not through some kind of prestigious journal, let's say. That would be ultimate. Nice way to go. It would be really nice to see something like that published in a prestigious journal, that medical journal that people would respect, and start to be a foot in the door for the Keshe Foundation to really reach the doctors and the people on the ground floor of the hospitals and the various services that are helping people with virus conditions. They need to have some physicality proof, something that others can duplicate, something that is recorded in a scientific manner with all the ins and outs of the control case and the particular people being treated and so on, outcomes, which are all in the document. Mark mentions, back to our previous topic of masks, that a lady recently passed out while driving on the highway and crashed. Lack of oxygen was cited, mask related. So,
really?
Yeah, and I see all these people driving with a mask in a car, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's hard.
I once proposed to Mr. Keshe, this mandatory masks everybody has on. Maybe we can have a way to infuse gas on it, and then as a breathing device. But he was concerned that it might not be approved. On the mask.
On the mask, the GANs on a mask. Yeah. Right. It's a natural. It seems, they're to impregnate it into the mask material in some way. Right.
But he thought that it might have some kind of approval. I tried it. Yeah. I tried it. It wasn't I can still. I made a mask with a cloth, Then I always soak it in gas and have it dry a little bit and I breathe on it. That's what I use. Yeah.
Seems good. Because we're told to breathe the GANS water anyway, the vapors. So why not breathe it through a mask? Mr. Keshe has talked about spraying a mask at one point. Just spraying a mask actually works to help reduce the virus as well, because as Neil mentioned earlier, the virus is so tiny compared to the fibers of the mask. It just passes through like chicken wire and a bug. It's you spray water on that, it closes all those chicken wire holes up and makes them much smaller, and there's a good chance that the virus might get caught up in that, sprayed on water and depleted by the mask eventually. Oh yeah, Mark, that's right. I think that was mentioned by Mr. Keshe. New dialysis from Keshe. Mark says here, no needles, no tubes, done plasmatically. Not a dream. I believe it's been done, exists now in China. Okay. Thank you for that reminder.
Right. And I think there's, it has two benefits. One, it allows the kidney to rest and rebuild itself, while at the same time, it opens up the tubes that are clogged.
Yes, that sounds like the ideal process.
And like you said, the rate of infection is very high. I know someone whose wife also, I think there was a contaminated needles or something along that line, which caused her demise.
Yeah, you have to be in a really pristine, clean environment with that whole dialysis thing. You can do it at home, but it's very difficult. My mother was a registered nurse. She knew all about that stuff as well.
And while you're on that, with the amputations, I know, for example, diabetes in here, where I am in New England in the state of Connecticut, is the largest reason for amputations. And with the good news about the COVID, the energy pack, is that we can rebuild these tissues and the bone. As Mr. Keshe demonstrated, was it 2008? Where he grew toe, and also the woman with the very rare disease, he said there was only 13 people in the world who had it, where you could see the bones on her fingers. The flesh was actually peeled back. Yeah, and they grew it 12 years ago.
I think in the last Knowledge Seekers workshop, he showed that.
Yes. You can see that for yourselves. And also, as Mr. Keshe said, when he fell off a horse in Belgium with 8 broken ribs, two in two places, and by using this technology, he was giving a speech within a week, a 5-hour.
Yep,
a 5-hour presentation.
Takes a lot to keep Mr. Keshe down. He hasn't missed a workshop in 5 years. More than 5, 6, almost 7 years or whatever it's been.
So that's how understanding the calcification, some of the things we can do with it, and the decal. So those are good things about the corona. And especially the porosity in the hip for women who give life, as he said. They pay for that because the cycle keeps pulling the calcium, which causes the porosity, which causes a breakage. And this is going to be relieved.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Okay, does anyone else have something they'd like to bring up? Show and tell or discuss?
I just wish the sales department will hurry up on the products. We need to have the products in our hands out here in US or North America.
Well, people have received their suits, their silver COVID suits. Any reports on those?
I have not. I've tried to order a couple of times. I have issues with PayPal, and the banking has a lag time. So I'm actually suggesting to Crashmare, if they can have relationship with a US bank, that could be helpful. So it makes it much more easier. So I'm still waiting on mine.
I think you can use credit cards on the website now, on the store, KF store.
With credit cards right now?
I think so. I'll just check here.
Oh, I have to check.
I'm not sure. I'd have to check something out in order to find out about that. I believe I heard someone say that the credit cards are now usable. Okay, what else do we have? Well, anything else, or shall we wrap up for today? No curious cats out there? Want to venture a topic?
I hope you're not getting ready to say going once.
Well, I've had a long, hard day, and if no one has anything they want to say, you don't have to force the issue here. I don't
No
have
problem.
anything particular to teach for today, so. Been a long day, starting out with a 6-hour workshop at 7 o'clock in the morning, and an 8-hour work day, followed by a workshop here. Now it's 12:30 at midnight my time. But I am willing, as usual, to carry on for endless hours of entertainment here, if anybody has the necessity. But if there's no necessity, no problem. We carry on, do something else until we have necessity. Sometimes we do, and we carry on for 6 or 8 hours of fun and games here in this group. Well, I don't want to push the issue here, so maybe we'll wrap things up for today and save our energy for the Knowledge Seekers workshop coming up all too quickly tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central European Time. That's Thursday, July 9th. And I'm sure Mr. Keshe will have more surprises for us and interesting soul teachings as well, which is the way things are going more and more. Discussing the universal community and all the ins and outs and how to approach that whole topic.
There's also the Public American Corona team on Sundays. And there's a variety of meetings in the different language communities, mostly through Zoom. But if you're in a language community and that is your primary language, you may benefit from attending those meetings. And even if you're not, you'll benefit from attending. Somehow the soul receives.
And
Yeah.
we have every Sunday the spraying of the Gans waters of Cup 1 for the Dome of Peace.
And that's at Sunday at 12 noon Central European Time or 6 p.m. Central European Time. Whatever that works out to your local area, you can spray on both times or just take one of them. The idea Mr. Keshe put forward is to spray the same time each week or same times each week, but keep your habits consistent. Alrighty, I'm not seeing any new info or questions here, so I'm going to call it a wrap for today. So thanks everyone for attending today's Keshe Plasma Reactor group and putting forth your ideas and conversation here. And we'll see if YouTube wants to take us off for mentioning COVID and 5G all in the same sentence. I think we're good. And we have the data to back us up as well. So no one's going to put us down. Ursula says gratitude, and that is the key word for this week's thoughts, let's say. There's a lot that can be done with an attitude of gratitude. It's sort of at the core of everything. To make gratitude your mantra. Gratitude and intention, yes indeed. With attention. Okay, well, enough for now. I'm getting tireder. I'm going to crash soon. So, we will end it. Thank you, everyone. Much gratitude. We'll see you in the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, and keep spraying, keep doing your thing out there, letting people know about the plasma technology. And soon we will be bringing in the space technology and all of the trimmings that go with that. So stay tuned and look forward to the best times this planet has ever encountered. That's what I believe. Best times for humans ever. Okay, signing out. Rick out. Bye for now.
Thank you.